Have to carry a life-size cardboard cutout of yourself everywhere, or a pineapple on a leash everywhere.
What? What? Where did you find this one? Ugh.
What sort of crazy do you want to be?
Egotistical or a madman? Oh, that's so good.
One hand, with the pineapple, at least you've always got food available. There's some benefit to that one, right? Whereas just a cardboard cutout of yourself. What are the benefits? That's what I want to know.
Is the picture of yourself in the cardboard cutout, is it kind of ironic? Like, does it look like I'm being funny and ironic, or am I just a narcissist?
I have not specified what the cardboard cutout is, so you can in any pose or facial expression that you would like. You need to describe it to us, though.
I mean, there's an angle where it's like you're grieving the loss of your identical twin, you know, and you carry them on with you. But then it's just like be a liar for the rest of your life.
The people that know you, they're like, you're still grieving your identical twin after 20 years that you've been carrying around this cardboard cutout.
I feel like this pineapple on the leash is going to take some pretty hearty damage, right? Getting dragged around. Can we put some little wheels on it or put it on a trolley and then carry it around just to make sure that it doesn't get so munched?
I imagine it doesn't have to be the same pineapple, but anytime you go out, you need a pineapple on a leash. Yeah.
I feel like that's a great conversation starter. But you have to figure out what you're going to say to the why question. What would you say to the why?
That's what I'm wondering, especially with the cardboard cutout. How does that conversation go? Why do you have that? Well, I used to take it with me everywhere. Why? Well, what do you do with it? You can't answer, really.
One time I was a guest on a podcast and they made me...
Exactly. Why didn't you choose the pineapple, you idiot?
Just be like, stag do.
Endless stag do.
I feel like there's an answer with the pineapple on the leash to be like, whenever someone offers me pizza, I need to amend the pizza. Make sure that it's right.
Well, yeah, there's lots of stories you could create with that one, right? Why do you always carry around this leash with a pineapple? It's to remind me of those days I was stuck in prison with that ball and chain on my leg. There's so many things you could just...
Ooh,
little stories,
like
you know?
Mysterious.
I think in either case, though, if the question is, if you had to always do this when you go out, I think I'm staying home quite a lot and with whatever choice I take.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think a good option, right? This is going to be my choice. I'm going to go with the pineapple. I'm going to call him Bob or something like that. Give it a name. And just when people ask you, it's like, oh, yeah, this is Bob. Do you want to pet him? You know? So just go full crazy, but just be absolutely normal with everything else apart from the pineapple and the leash. I think people would get used to it. They would just be like, that's just Zach, an eccentric guy. And I think people would get over it. Do you get what I'm saying? Especially if you're normal in absolutely everything else, but you just have this imaginary pet pineapple.
What's better if people don't get over it, but they embrace it? They start to take ownership of Bob themselves, you know? And it's not just...
I reckon it would happen, man.
Bob is our pineapple. He comes along to game night, you know? He's one of us.
I think people are empathetic enough to do that. I think people you knew around town, they'd be like, oh, hi, Bob, you know? They'd start to say hi to your pet pineapple.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to go with crazy madman rather than the narcissist. So I'm also going to have a pineapple. I'll call her Sheila. And I'm just going to embrace all the looks. Eventually, I think it would be some good character building, right? Knowing that people are looking at you and thinking you're being funny. Eventually, you're going to develop quite a thick skin and a kind of a fearlessness, you know, a lack of shame, and in a good way, I think, comfortable in your own skin and with the pineapple skin next to you. I don't know. I think there could be some good that comes of it, but it's really ridiculous. I love it.
They say that, you start looking like your pet. So, I think that thick skin would be true, Sam, and also probably spiky.
Yeah.
And fluff on top. I would also go with the pineapple. I think mostly because that's why I have fruit on hand at all times, it's good. I like pineapple, especially on pizza. Hey, Zach.
These guys are killing me. Welcome to the Lens and Veil podcast. Join Shem, Sam, and Zach as they dive into a designer-focused analysis of A Feast for Odin by Uwe Rosenberg.
Well, today we are talking about A Feast for Odin, which is a game with so many things going on, and I'm going to give you a brief overview. Generally, it's a worker placement game where players have a bunch of different workers that are Vikings. Each player has their own player board as well. It's a big player board with lots and lots of little squares that they need to fill in essentially to gain more and more income and to remove all the negative points that are on there. So rather than gaining points in this game, often it's just about removing negatives. There are lots of other ways to gain points, but there's a lot of negative points that you start the game with. The game is going to take place over 6 or 7 rounds, and there's a lot of different little phases of upkeep and things like that. Some rounds you generate some income of food, like there's a harvest where you generate food. We gain weapons that will help us in the action phase. And then we go around taking actions. It's a worker placement game, but it's a worker placement game with a little bit of a twist. On your turn, you can place 1, 2, 3, or 4 workers. And the number of workers that you place will depict the action that you do and the strength of that action. So someone could, on their turns, they could place 4 workers and then another 4 workers. Let's say they had 8 this round, and they would be completely done in 2 turns. Another player could keep placing 1 worker at a time, and in that sense, they would have far more turns that round, but they might achieve a similar amount of stuff because the strength of the action is dependent on the number of workers that you've got. But there's a few other twists with that as well, where if you place workers on a spot that requires 3, you also get to draw an occupation card. And if you place workers on a spot that requires 4, you get to play down an occupation card, which is giving you a Brucey bonus for the rest of the game. A lot of them are ongoing effects that are kind of like engine building, but there are some one-time and immediate effects on those occupation cards as well. There are, I don't know how many, but 60 or 70 worker placement actions. Someone will know the answer who's listening, but there are a lot of actions that you can take. There is blocking, but it's quite rare that you will get blocked just because of the number of actions that are there, though there are some key ones that blocking will occur in. They're separated into rows with types, so there's lots of different things that you can do with your Viking village. You can build sheds, stone houses, and long houses for putting food in there to generate points and more resources. You can build ships. Ships you can use to go out and fish or hunt whales or go out and pillage and raid other settlements, gaining amazing plunder. You can go to the livestock market and buy some sheep or buy some cattle. And it's the standard Uwe Rosenberg thing where if you have 2 of them at the end of the round, they are going to breed. In this case, the animals that breed will take 2 turns to generate babies. So 1 turn you'll flip them over, they'll be pregnant, and the next turn they'll generate a baby. And then there's other actions where you can gather resources like wood, stone, coal, all of those sorts of things. Other actions where you exchange resources for tiles that you can place on your board, and then the raiding and pillaging and all of that. There are other actions still where you can take the ships that you've got and emigrate, and the ship that you have is going to flip over and it's going to cover over a space on your board where you would have had to feed Vikings. Because at the end of every round, we have to feed our Vikings. We're going to have a feast and we have to feed our Vikings. These Vikings can be fed with orange tiles or red tiles, and there are 4 colored tiles in the game: orange, red, green, and blue. And they kind of are valued in that order. The orange tiles are the worst, and the red, and then the green and the blue. And there are also actions in this game that let you flip over a tile. So you can upgrade an orange to a red, or a red to a green, or a green to a blue. The orange and red tiles thematically are kind of like food that you can eat, but you can also do other things with them. And the green and blue tiles are kind of equipment and loot and tools and clothing and all those sorts of things. And those are the main ones that you are placing on your home board to generate more bonuses, to generate more income, and to gain points. So there's really a lot going on in this game, and I've kind of just skimmed over the surface. But it's a tile placement game with a ton of options that is Viking themed and feels very thematic to me. What are your guys' thoughts on the game generally?
So in general, this game is fantastic, and it's well loved, it's well rated, it's been around for a while now, and it's a big sandboxy Euro style resource game with tile placement as its core kind of interface, I guess you'd say. It's not so much of a tile placement game in the genre, but you're placing tiles a lot. And I think it's not so much in the genre because like the restrictions around placement are so minimal. There's a little puzzle there with like the blues and the greens, whereas the greens are kind of harder to place. And there is this idea of trying to get those bonuses you're surrounding and unlock more income. There's some very minor restrictions on how you achieve that. But generally, you can place a tile almost anywhere you like. And like you're saying, Sam, they're mostly to remove point negatives, which is an interesting thing in the game, right? Where in most of the things in this game, you get some kind of extra board or tile, and it comes with a bunch of negative points, and it's your job to then remove those negatives. So I like how that's like quite a different take on this thing. There's other games or tile land games like this where they will do that system where like you get rewarded for covering sections, or the more you cover, the more points you're not losing. But this is kind of like right in your face from the start. Like, here's tons of negative points, and your job is to cover these negative points at like a bare minimum sort of direction in the game. What I really like about the game, I think, is that while it is quite a big table sprawling and visually intimidating game, I guess you'd say, it's actually not that hard to get into, I think, for at least an experienced gamer, someone who's played a fair few, intro games. There's not a lot of like edge case rules and little things you must know. Most of the actions are intuitive. It's like, oh, it tells me to get this tile, and then I know based on the color where I can place that tile. So while there's like so many different avenues and actions and types of tiles, most of the time they're following a very simple rule set, which makes the game pretty easy to get into once you get the little rules to each other way.
Yeah, I agree on the whole thing about gaining new boards. Like, they give you positive points, and then they give you more negative points, and they give you positive points, but you can cover over the negative points, basically. So if you can fill up those new boards, they're good for you. If you can't, they're going to bite you in the bum. And that's really great because you can actually get a lot of those extra boards. Like, you could get a new building each turn, you could get multiple buildings each turn, you could get new islands to settle each turn. But actually, there's like this tension around how much stuff am I going to be able to do? How much stuff do I want to try and fill up with these tiles? And if I go overboard and trying to do too much stuff, then it'll end up really tanking my in-game points. So that was a really nice tension, I think, over like the whole point scoring in the game. And you're like, at what point should I buy new boards? At what point do I need to say, no, actually, I've got enough space to fill out? And then sometimes you might find yourself in the last round, you're like, oh man, I wish I'd actually got another board because I had extra resources to put on it. So I'm going to miss out on some points that I could have had.
I also like how it's not a one for one, like gaining points versus losing points. So in a game, I like Ticket to Ride, for example, if you can take as many tickets as you like in that game, but if you don't fulfill those contracts, those tickets, the routes, you're going to lose those. And so it's either you got the points or you lost the points, like one for one. Where in this game, it's like, it's not one for one. There's more points available than what you can lose, but you start out at a negative. I'm not sure what the average might be, but let's say you start at like negative a third and you can get up to positive 2/3 or something. That kind of swing, I think, is what most of the tiles have. So I like that. It's not just oh, you missed out by one thing. You mean you lose all the points now rather than gain the points. There's this nice little, every piece you place is gradually getting you towards the positive points.
Yeah, that's great. I want to know what you guys think about the worker placement in this game, because I think they went to town having so many worker placement spots, and yet I actually think it's great. So we've got the whole column thing where all the actions are divided into columns based on how many workers you need to place on them. But then we've also got the row thing, which is kind of like thematically that these actions are all doing the same kind of thing. Like, there's a row which is about gaining wood, stone, and coal from the strips, the forest and mountain strips. What did you guys think about the worker placement system?
I actually thought it was really clever, simple, easy to understand. It had the little added extra spice of the fact that if you placed on a 3-worker spot, so on the third column, you got to pick up a card from a deck of cards. And then if you placed on the 4-worker column, you could play a card from your hand down. And so those cards could give you extra points, extra bonuses, little engine building things, instant bonuses, in-game scoring, I think, as well. Most of them gave you some in-game scoring. But anyway, there were also some like other actions where you could pick up and play cards, but that kind of just made the whole work placement thing a lot more interesting because it just added this tension where you wanted to min-max things. And sometimes you wanted to take a forward action. It happened to me several times where I wanted to take a 4-worker action, but I didn't have a card to play down. So I'm like, oh, actually, that doesn't feel good to take, even though it's an action that I super need to take for what I'm trying to do. maybe I should delay that. Maybe I should try and go and find a card somewhere before I do that. And I think we're playing with the expansion where there are these extra actions as well,
Correct.
where if you finished your turn with this 2 worker action, you could also play a card. And so you kind of wanted to at least have a card every round so you could do that 2 worker action and play the card. So I think if it was just the worker thing, it'd be like, oh yeah, that's very clean and like a different number of workers for different power of actions. But having that extra spice of like, if you do the big powerful actions, you also get to do stuff around this whole card, and that made it a lot trickier for me in terms of like, what am I going to do? How am I going to sequence my actions? And as you said, Sam, there's a few actions that people compete over them more, especially maybe in certain games. A lot of people are trying to do the same thing, so there might be competition over a certain action. And often those are like 3 worker or 4 worker actions, especially there's a lot of really powerful 4 worker actions. And so you actually really want to take that early in your turn. But if you don't have a card, then you're like, oh, can I get away with it? Can I get away with leaving that action open for another turn? Sometimes you get burnt, but hey.
I think what is an incredible feat is that I need to actually find the number, but I'm just going to make up a number. There's 60 actions. There might be more. There might be 70, but that there are this many worker placement actions, and yet it's not crazy overwhelming. Like, I think that the interface is quite good. Now, the cost for something like that is, say, if you take a standard worker placement game like Architects or Stone Age or something like that, the worker placement spots feel quite thematic and they feel very integrated into the main board, you know, and there's quite a generous use of space in terms of having space for artwork and things all around the main board because we're only putting 10, 11, 12 worker placement actions on them. And this, it's a very efficient use of space, but there's hardly any flourishes of artwork or anything like that because we need to put all the information about all of the possible actions on this board. And so it's a smaller board than Architects for the work placement actions, but it's done very efficiently, I think.
I guess that's one negative for it, is that there are so many options. While it's a positive because you don't get blocked so much and there's kind of multiple ways to achieve what you want, the downside is that you can get lost sometimes when you suddenly like lose focus or
Right.
yeah, sometimes you set up your like 3 turns kind of planned out, you know what you're gonna do, you're gonna get this, then I'll pick up that, then I'll do that. And in a moment after that, you're like, oh, and now what? That's when I think there's a bit of a flaw, not a flaw, but there's room for players to get a little bit AP or kind of disinterested, I think, in the game where you go, oh, I don't know what to do. And I had this a few times when I'm playing where I could do that, I guess. Like, why would I do that versus this? And there's sometimes you might feel moments where you lack direction in the game. There are definitely parts of the game that give you direction, like cards in your hand might say, this is a better action for you, or if you do this thing with this card, it's very beneficial. And if you start preparing and strategizing and planning out a few turns, that's great. But there are sometimes moments when you go, oh, actually, I don't know what I'm doing right now. I have a sort of an off turn where don't have a plan. And suddenly there's 40 actions I could take, maybe.
Right.
Maybe there's less than that. But those moments can be a bit like, oh, I don't know. And that can, lead to the game dragging on if all players are in those moments or whatever. But I will say it's not every turn and it's not a common thing in the game. But that is kind of a thing with this many options that it's going to happen at least once or twice per player in the game. There's going to be a moment where you just kind of don't know what to do and can't see why you do one thing over the other. And that's going to come down to experience, come down to the skill level of the player and how well they know the system. But that's definitely something I think that is a downside to this many actions, where a game like Raiders only has 8 worker placement actions and you're only doing 2 of those each turn. Like, they're very limited. And so on your turn, you might have the choice of 1 to 3 things, really, as one of your actions. And that decision is so minimal. Like, oh, do I want food or silver? Like, I'll just get silver. And the turn's over. Whereas this is like, oh, I've got so many things I could do. And the ramifications of those can be so many and
Right.
how it chains out. So I guess you feel the consequence more of a bad decision in this game than you might do in a game where there's only 8 actions.
It's totally like a strength and a weakness, though, right? It's like what the game wanted to be. It wanted to be this sprawling, like, not exactly a sandbox, but like big decision space where you're kind of making the strategy that you want to have amongst the actions, unless occasionally someone blocks you. But yeah, there were definitely some AP moments, and I'm generally quite a quick player. But there were definitely some moments where I'm like, sorry guys, I'm gonna have to rethink what I was gonna do and like sit there for a few minutes having to think about it and think through all the options. So yeah, I do agree that like there was definitely some moments where you just couldn't take quick turns.
a lot of that is also because there's like one row for, say, raiding, right? Like there's 4 different options, I think, how you could raid, like how you could use your ships to get plunder. And if all 4 are available, that's when you go, oh, which one do I take? And I think that card system you've talked about is great for that because you might actually I'll take the bigger one and play a card or I'll draw a card. I think what that's doing with the whole like 4 options, it's allowing the blocking to not be so impactful. So it's like, let's say you're playing architects and let's say the wood, the forest was blockable. What we'd do is we'd have, oh, there's 4 slots. The first player gets 3 wood, then 2 wood, then 1 wood. And it's just the same action, but you get a slightly worse version. This is kind of doing that, where it's saying, oh, you won't get blocked necessarily. Not very often you get blocked, but what you get might not be the exact version of that action you want, which is good.
Yeah.
Like it's good for the player to have access, right? But that's the negative is like when all those options are available and maybe they're all equally viable, like as a good decision for you in the moment, that's when it's like, oh, which one do I take? Do I just do 1 worker, 2 workers? And what's my next action going to be? And how's it going to matter? That's another thing where it's like, it's just so broad, like in what you could do in that space. Whereas once people start placing workers, those decisions actually become slightly easier because your worker pool is getting smaller. So spending 4 workers goes from like a third of your workforce to like half your workforce to like your entire workforce. So it's that decision becomes more impactful. So yeah, there's a lot of little wrinkles get on there, but I think what they're trying to achieve, what the designers trying to achieve, is this thing of you're not really blocked, but it's not maybe the first option you chose, which leads to that kind of conundrum, I think, for me.
And I hope that this question makes sense, but I wonder, like, when you find yourself in a slowdown in this game where you have to stop and think, are you considering, hey, what are all the things that I can do? Like, what are my options? Or are you considering, hey, what are the things I really want to do?
Well, I think the problem is when you don't know what to do. That's where I'm saying there's an issue where if you suddenly lose focus or lose direction, you don't have a plan to go forward. Suddenly it does become that first option. What are all the things I could do? And you have to think through all those. So if you have direction, if you know what you want, then that's an easy decision. You just go for one of the options that's available for the thing you want. Like, I really want to get some more food. All right, let's get those red tiles. And there's a few options there for red tiles. That's an easy decision to make, right? But when you're suddenly like, I've fed everybody, like I know I've got my food sorted and I know I've got this thing planned out. And now what do I do? Like, I don't know what to do. That's the moments, I think, for me.
What about you, Zach?
I think the moments especially happen for me when I'd planned to do something and then realized, oh, actually, I don't have a card to play down, or else someone else has taken the spot that was the spot that I wanted to use. Those are the moments where I had to kind of reassess. And at that moment of reassessing, it's like, now there's so many options that I could do instead of that thing. You know, like I wanted to do that thing. Now that I don't have that option anymore, I realize it's not the best thing. Now what do I do? Like there's 60 actions out there. And I think that was kind of like the AP moments when that happened.
And I think one of the strengths of this game is the sandbox nature of the game. Like it is a big, wide game that you can play different ways, explore different paths. So the game is encouraging you to actually try different stuff.
Yes.
But it's far easier in this game just to keep doing the same stuff that you know how to do. Like if I was to play again now, I would probably just build out a bunch of long ships and go raiding the whole time. That's probably what I'd do.
Because you're a Viking.
And I wouldn't get lost in the decision space. I'd be like, that's what I'm doing. I've got focus. That's what I'm doing. But the moment I'm like, oh, I might try breeding or I might try trading, or that's when I might start getting lost. So it's like, it's a really good thing because you can come back to it and try and master it. But the moment you try and do something different, it's almost like you get pushed off balance. Like, oh, now I've got to refigure out how to play this and how to focus. And it's kind of hard to learn the strategies a little bit for those more niche ways of playing, I think. So I think like the moments I had that were like that were in those plays when I was trying something different.
Yeah.
So I wonder, like, do some players just do the same thing and I love it? Like, I can just do this. I like how to do it and it's fun and I come back to it and keep doing it.
I'm just the sheep extraordinaire. I'm just call me the shepherd. I just love, gathering and raising these sheep and then, getting some wool and eventually slaughtering them and benefiting from that. And I'll do that all the time. I love it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of like similar to that conversation we had with Civilization. These games where there's all these different options and the game is showcasing a lot of different paths for you, but it's kind of in the hands of the player if they want to experiment with those paths. And we find ourselves, whenever we play a game, we're playing with that same person, ourself, that we seem to be stuck with all the time, and our own tendencies and things like that.
Yeah, and I think the game doesn't only offer you a wealth of ways to play in terms of the action selection, because there is also different ways to play in terms of the tile placement and aiming for coin income or aiming for bonus income. Like the first game that we played, I mainly did stuff on my starting board, and I pretty much managed to fill almost that whole starting board up. The second time we played, I pretty much ignored my starting board. I rushed getting like a different island board and a bunch of different building boards, and I just filled those out, and that was the way that I had my coin income, and that was a way for me to have a lot more bonus income a lot quicker than you would on your main board. And then at the end of the game, I just filled over the negative points on my main board just to try and like not get a whole bunch of negative points. And it worked out really well. And so like that was a completely different style of like the boards that I go for. And then I saw like in our first game, Sam and Shem got like 2 or 3 island boards each, like whereas in my games, I think I maybe got 1 island board or something like that. So there's like a whole different bunch of ways that you can decide to build out the boards where you're going to be placing tiles as well, and what you're going to aim for and which bonuses they have and all that kind of stuff.
I want to come back to just this conversation around decision space and analysis paralysis and feeling like maybe sometimes, too many options leads to too much thinking time and downtime for players. And I want to talk about it maybe generally from a game design point of view. Have you guys encountered this in your games? Like, I know there are kind of 2 schools of thoughts that analysis paralysis is a player problem rather than a game problem. I understand that. I think there are people who are prone to that. But I also think that there are games that can be susceptible to players needing to think for a while. Is this a problem? What are some ways that you try to combat this in your game designs?
So the problem for me is not so much like AP, because AP by itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like it can just be the fact that it's a very heavy game and requires a lot of brain power. The problem for me is when the AP leads to me like getting disengaged with the game.
Okay.
When I start thinking like, why am I playing this? Like I can't be bothered, or like I'm not enjoying it, or that my decisions don't seem like they matter so much. And you start to like go, I don't really care if I win or lose. I'm just going through the motions. And it's a weird thing. I'm saying it's a problem, but I'm not saying I have a solution, because it's probably a game to game thing and even like an experience to experience thing. Like you could play one game and love it and play a second time and not like it the same game. So, but yeah, there's definitely some things there where like, how can we introduce more engagement for players in a game? And maybe AP leading to downtime is a big factor for disengagement, where if it's so long before your next turn, you're going to start to lose interest in the game and you just kind of want to go, let's play something else, because I'm waiting 5 minutes for my turns and my turns don't feel that exciting. And on the other side, it's that excitement factor of your turns. Are your turns actually that rewarding? Do they feel fun? Are you waiting for it? You can't wait for the next turn. So there's lots of little like subtleties to this, I think, and it's hard to pin down for me, really.
I think I get what you're saying in that I've felt that feeling in games where I've got a final turn and I look around the board and there's nothing that's going to score me points and I get disengaged. I'm like, oh, what's the point of me having another turn when I can't do anything on the last turn to score points? So I think I see where you're coming from. Zach, do you have any thoughts around AP and all that stuff?
Oh, yes, I do. No, you asked if that happens in our games, right? And I mean, I'll talk about the game that's been published. In Chaos Order, in Circadian's Chaos Order, that can happen, especially later on in the game, especially in the move phase, because it's a game where the way you move around the map is incredibly important for trying to win the game. And so when you get towards the final rounds where people could win or lose the game based on their decisions, you can get some people who, like in a chess game, just start analyzing like every single movement they could make. And so it can start to just take way too long. It can also happen in the battle phase, and I've seen that happen a few times when people take too long to really decide on the card that they want to play. And the thing is with the battle phase is that sometimes people aren't actually involved in a battle in a round because they didn't enter into a conflict with anyone else. And so they just have to wait while players take a bunch of time to resolve all these battles that they're not involved in. And so it's also disengaging in that way. So those are some criticisms of my own game. I think the game is great, but I've seen that be a bit like disengaging for some players sometimes. Partly it's a player problem because like I think you kind of need to read the room as well in terms of being like, if other players are taking 5 minutes to do their move turn, it's about right that I take 5 minutes. I probably shouldn't take 10 minutes because that's kind of unfair to the other players. I think if there were really big problems with that and it was like a game I played often, I don't see any problem with having like a chess timer of being like, in the move phase, we can each have 5 minutes to make up our mind about how to move. And that's fair. It's like everyone's got the same amount of time. Give a decent amount of time that seems fair. And, but maybe some people would find that frustrating or insulting or something like that. I don't know. But I would be fine with that because of the type of player I am. I'm just like at a certain point, even if it's not the optimal move, I'm just like, all right, I'm just going to do something, right? But maybe some people, for them, it creates like a lot of anxiety if they're not 100% sure of their move, or or they might feel time pressure. So I can understand why in that case some games just people aren't going to enjoy them as much and they're going to disengage more, and they're going to find like some games are going to create that sort of AP more than others as well.
So the one you're talking about there is more that the players who are not playing are disengaging, where it's the AP that leads to downtime, right? That's
Yeah.
where they're disengaged. So whereas the other side of that is that those players that are taking a long time, they're taking a long time because they're so engaged, like they're so invested in the game. And the issue I have more is the other side I was saying, where it's the player's turn and they're not invested. They're
Right.
taking ages
Yeah.
because they don't know what to do because they don't really care anymore. That's the problem I see. I don't see the ones as much of a problem other than downtime. Like downtime sure is a problem, but it's a player thing. And like that's just something to be aware of in game design. I think that if you start seeing in your playtests that the game's dragging because of downtime, then that's something to fix, something to solve. But I'm more concerned about players being disengaged because their decisions don't feel interesting or don't feel like, I don't know, inspiring. That's to make a better word
Yeah.
to use, where they just kind of lose interest as a player. So I'd be very cautious of that in our games if I see players, or if I start feeling like that in our playtests. And I have had that in our playtests before, where I just go, I'm just like, ugh. I'm trying to think of examples, I guess. And I think we've had this in recent ones where we've been playtesting and I have kind of disengaged a bit. Sometimes it's purely because it's like on TTS and you're tired or something. That can happen, right? But it's always in those moments, I think, important to try and separate yourself from your tiredness and go, is there actually a problem here? Because maybe there actually is a problem and it's just a coincidence that you're tired.
Or sometimes the problem is me. It's yourself,
Yeah,
right?
it totally
And your
can be.
attitude. Yeah.
It can be. So yeah, you gotta watch your attitude a lot, especially when you're playtesting, and especially when you're playtesting someone else's game. I think it's really important to try and keep your lips shut if it's not not constructive. But yeah, there has been recent times when I'm trying to recall what they were, which games they were playing, but where I was disengaged or felt like there was no point in playing, or really playing with a lot of intention. I think I would have brought it up and mentioned like that I was feeling that way or whatever. So I guess the question then as designers is like, how do we keep players engaged? That's the problem to solve for me. Like it's not so much about AP and downtime stuff. It's about how do you keep your players engaged and invested, not so that they're just like they want to replay it. That's one other question, right? Do they want to play the game again after playing? But the more important thing is, do they want to keep playing while they're playing? Sam, we talked about this a bit, I think, with Cooper Island, where a few rounds into our first play, we're like, I want to play this again. Like, you want to play it again as you're playing the game.
Yeah.
That's the feelings that I want to have in our games, where you haven't even finished it and you want to play again. So the opposite of that, wanting to quit halfway through, is not the goal. So, like, what are some tricks, I guess, as designers to add investment, add players wanting to keep playing and keep them motivated within the game to keep achieving stuff? What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think there's two that are obvious answers, and that's carrot and stick, right? So, like, carrot is, here's these rewards, here's this income that you can get at the end of the round. If you achieve this extra bonus thing, you're going to get more stuff, like Underwater Cities as an example. When we're working towards that end of the fourth round, when we get our income, you're wanting to put down as much as you possibly can on your board so that you get more income in the income phase. Feast for Odin does this, like covering over more stuff on your player board, gaining more income coins that you can then place around those bonus spots that will generate more resources and bonuses. So that is a driving factor for the game for engagement and excitement and stuff like that. Now, the question might be asked, well, I can do that a number of ways. How do I pick which way I do that? And that's a fair question to ask, right? So if Feast for Odin wants you to decide, and if that's a good thing for you, that's great. For some people, that's not a good thing for them to decide. There's too many ways they could do this thing, and that is disengaging. But then there's the stick approach as well. Like, hey, this bad stuff's going to happen if you don't do this thing. That's also in a Feast for Odin lightly with the feast. Every second round, we've got a feast where we haven't gained a harvest at the start of that round. So those rounds are a little bit tighter if you don't have any food generation as part of your engine. So you might need to go out hunting or fishing and doing things that you wouldn't normally do to fill up your player board just because you've got hungry Vikings that want to eat. And we see this in lots of games. Ezra and Nehemiah, we've got this feeding mechanism. But then games like Hadrian's Wall and Anarchy, they're threatening players with invasion, the picks are coming in to attack. Are you going to be ready for this? And if you're not, you're going to be punished. So those are two things that I think can drive player motivations.
I think like one keyword that I was just thinking about was rhythm, where like if a game has good rhythm and every turn you kind of feel like you're, moving at a similar pace and things are kind of ticking off, working well, it's good and you enjoy it. The process feels fun. Even if it's repetitive, it's kind of like you're going through that motion that feels natural. And it's those moments where suddenly it stops and you have to, oh, I've stopped moving. I've got to rethink where I'm going and I'm not moving right now. That's where it feels uncomfortable and like that's where the disengagement can happen, I think. So having that kind of rhythm to a game can be very important, I think. And I mean, the simpler the game, probably the easier that is, because it's like, oh, my turn's here, I do this thing. My turn's here, I do this thing. Like it's a simple card game or something. Very easy just to play your card, play your card, play your card. But the more options you give someone, the more stumbling blocks there are potentially for them to trip over and not know where to go from that point.
Yeah, along with rhythm, I think progression is probably another word which can be pretty good for this in terms of making people feel like they're achieving something, they're getting better, like they've built their engine. Why are engine builders so popular? Because people love to progress and make it so I'm doing that same action, but now it does so much more stuff, like, oh, that's exciting. And like, I've progressed, I'm more powerful than I was, right? I think that can create really good feelings in people because that's what you're trying to do, right? Thinking about this question, it just makes me think of introducing new people to games who maybe haven't played board games, right? Like, I'm sure you guys have had experiences of trying to teach people games and like they're just not into it and they're just not enjoying their turns and they just don't care, right? So the question is, how can you make those people care? Like, what can the game do to make those people care? And we talk about gateway games and, sometimes they have a bad reputation because some people talk about them as in like they're only good to bring people to better games or whatever, but like they're games. Like, if people only enjoy playing those, that's great. But another reason they're called gateway games is because they are good at these things, right? They're good at making people enjoy their turns, get engaged, stay engaged, and people that aren't necessarily passionate about board games like we are and like many people we play games with are. And so I think, yeah, it'd be really interesting, even in this podcast, maybe covering some of those sorts of like gateway games and specifically looking at this kind of like, what do they do in their turns that is so attractive to people and draws people in? I think that could be something interesting that we do in the future.
This conversation makes me think about some of the psychological research that's been done. And apparently humans, we are much more driven by preventing loss. We're much more motivated to prevent loss than we are to gain, to benefit. And given the choice of potentially gaining $50 or potentially losing $50, people will protect against the losing rather than opt for the gain, even if the gain has better odds. We're not fully rational with that. So this is an interesting thing as game designers that we can use. We can use people's propensity to prevent loss in such a way that it's a more compelling motivator for mechanisms. But it also comes at a cost because I think it is more stressful for people. So even though it's more motivating to be told that you're going to lose something or something bad is going to happen to you, it might not be more fun. Like, it might be more stressful for people, and it depends what people are looking for in games. Do you guys use this in your games? Do you think about this whole idea of, hey, you could have a bonus here versus, hey, I'm actually going to penalize you if you don't do this thing? How do you use these two things? Yeah, player psychology and to drive direction and decision making. Because using a Feast for Odin as an example, we've got the minus points on your player board, right? Do you find that compelling to cover the minus points? Or do you find it compelling to go out and just gain points a positive way in the game?
I personally don't love games that are threatening me like that. There's definitely exceptions. I've enjoyed the Feast for Odin. I really like Ezra and Nehemiah, where you have to feed your people at the end of it. But even saying that, it's not my favorite part of the game, like having to feed your people. It's like stressful. So definitely in my games, a thing that I like to play on is kind of like the greed factor. Making it so there's ways where people can be punished if they're too greedy. And, in the example of Circadian's Chaos Order, it's about the combat system. You can be really greedy in the way that you try and win fights, but it can really punish you really hard if you get it wrong. But if you get it right, it can be super rewarding. So it's kind of like playing on that, like how much do I want to risk? And the risk reward, tempting people. And like, it's kind of like the virtue system in your guys' West Kingdom games. It's like, man, you can get some really good stuff out of playing in the low virtue strat, but then you end up with all these debts that you have to pay off, and if you don't pay them off, you can be super punished. So like that's the kind of thing that I personally like. So in my games, you'll probably see more of that sort of effect where it's like you can risk it, it might go well for you, and it might go terrible for you. You know, that's the kind of thing that I enjoy personally and what I tend to want to put in my games.
I think I only use the negative stuff generally, and I'm trying to think through my games I've done.
Scar Bray, perhaps.
Yeah, but more as a warning for the player. It's like as a player, you know this is something you probably shouldn't do. Like if you're gonna lose points if you do this,
Yeah.
or lose points if you don't do this. So you gave the example of the West Kingdom, Zach. So architects, the virtue track at the very bottom is negative points. It's just telling the player this is going to hurt you if you go down here. Like there are benefits, but just so you know, if you're down at the end, you'll lose points. So I kind of like using the negatives more in that way, where it's a way of teaching intention to a player, or like teaching them this might hurt you, just so you know this might hurt you. I much prefer to actually reward players in games.
Yeah.
So most of the games me and Sam have done, you're scoring in the tens of points, sometimes into the hundreds. So you're gaining a lot of points, not so much losing them. Whereas there's some of the games I've played where you might end with a negative score because like there's just so many negative points baked into the game.
So I think that's a really good point, that we would use negative points generally as a thing to say, hey, don't avoid this thing. Like in Hadrian's Wall, we're warning you, not that it's my design, but it's like you need to defend. Like there's not a strategy where you just completely sack your defense. That's what the game is about. You must defend. So there's a bit of tension being applied there. You're warning the player, hey, this is something you can't avoid. But in the other areas, it's like, hey, there's a bonus out here. We're tempting you with this, but you don't have to do that. You can ignore that. That's quite a good approach, I think, for using loss aversion as a motivator for things that need to be done to play the game properly versus bonuses in other areas to make players feel smart and enjoy coming back to try out different things.
And even in the West Kingdom with the whole debt system, if you get a debt card in any one of the 3 games, it's worth negative points. So it's telling you that's a bad thing, but we added in all 3 games, I think, where there's ways to make paying those off even stronger. So paying it off is good, but there are ways to actually go, you know what, if you pay it off with this character, then you're getting something else as well. So it can actually make that punishing thing feel fun and actually makes you feel quite smart as well.
And I think another example exactly of what Sam said is that Skara Brae, like the point of the game is you need to look after your village, shelter your people. And so it is teaching people like that's the point of the game. That's what the game's about. It's about sheltering your people. It's about getting rid of the midden. And so it makes sense that if you don't do those things, that you lose points. Like it's just like the theme of the game. So that's helping people to actually play the theme of the game, right?
And perhaps one thing that I learned from the West Kingdom about player psychology is that because it's saying that you're going to lose points at the end of the game and you're going to gain debts for dropping down the virtue track, what I've noticed is that players intuitively, they believe you about that and they stay away from it. Like they really stay away from it. And they kind of have to go against their natural instincts to experiment with a path that is actually really fun and is worth experimenting with. So that's one thing that I've picked up and learned, that actually there's a whole bunch of people that have played the game that think you just need to rush the cathedral, you need to be virtuous, and that's the only way to play. And so if I was doing it again, I would still want to incorporate that, but somehow tempt players down that negative path a little more. I don't know necessarily how to do that, but just it's so instinctive to not go down there that they really have to fight against themselves to do the evil thing. And I would want to figure out how to encourage people down that path a little more, if you know what I'm saying.
I think bringing this back to Feast for Odin, this kind of ties in the whole negative point thing and with the whole loss of direction and investment thing together, is the whole way you expand your player board. We've talked about the islands and about the longhouses and stuff, how they come with negative points. That same aspects there, right? Like, oh, I can get an island, but it's negative 18 points from the start. And players might actually avoid that. I think on our first game, 7 years ago, we did avoid it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if you get one, it gives you tons of direction.
That's right.
And so it's actually really good for you as a player to pick up an island early or pick up some other board, because you get that thing, you know you've got something to do now, you've got a job to take care of. So it's a weird thing where it's like it's offering ways to solve these things we've been talking about, but the sandbox nature also like leads to some other issues. But
That's right, because you're there sitting there looking at your player board being like I've got a coat and I've got a horn and I've got 60 negative points and you're telling me I'm supposed to go out and explore this other land? Like, no, I'm staying at home. I need to look down, you know? Yeah, it's really tricky from a player instinct kind of thing. Like you don't actually want to go out and do that thing because you're sitting there looking at so many negatives, but it solves a lot of the problems, right? As you're saying, Shem. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd almost say that to a new player of this game is like, if you do find yourself in a moment, I'd probably talk to myself here as well. If you find yourself in a moment where you kind of lose some direction or don't really know what you should be doing, get a board, like get another board, get some negative points, and that'll give you some real good motivation to cover up those negative points.
Yeah. Fantastic. So another part of the game is these tiles. So we've got so many different, basically polyomino tiles that come in 4 different colors. What do you guys think about this whole system with pieces that can upgrade and flip over and all that sort of thing? That felt like slightly thematic, perhaps. What do you guys think?
I don't know. The thematicness there was like very, very slight. I think that the puzzle was really good. Also, like in the feeding the people, if you put 2 of the same type of food in the feast, you had to flip one onto like the other side, which generally covered less space. It's like people get sick of eating the same thing all the time. So there's a few like little thematic touches in there. So on the main islands, you can only place the highest 2 levels of tile. So the blue and the green. The blue is the highest. You can place that anywhere. You can place blue tiles next to each other. The green tiles, you can't have them touching sides with other green tiles. I thought there was just such a great little twist, and it made things like really tricky. And then there was also the other twist that you couldn't cover over coin income symbols until you had covered all the spaces to the left and below them. And so these kind of like 2 little restrictions just made things not quite as simple and made like this really nice puzzle aspect to it where you're umming and ahhing about where I should put this piece. And you're saying, oh, maybe I should upgrade it so that it's blue, so that it's easy to put down. And I found that a really great way to keep you engaged in the game when other people were taking their turns, if you get what I'm saying. Because you were often making those decisions and thinking about that because you could place them on your board at any time, but once they were placed, they were locked in. So you were kind of making these decisions in the time that other people were deciding what they were doing. So the AP that players might have had in those moments, so this isn't addressing Shem's point about disengagement in your own turn, but disengaging on other people's turns wasn't so much a factor because you always had something to think about in terms of puzzling on your board. So I thought that was really cool. And it was also great how in the huts and the granaries or whatever they were called, you could place the lower 2 types of tiles as well. So there was another way to use those tiles, not just upgrading them, not just giving them as food to your people or whatever, but you could also place them onto certain boards, but not onto others.
And that was a good amount of direction, right? If you've managed to pick up an engine or build an engine that's generating a lot of food, and you're like, this is more food than all my Vikings could possibly eat. I want to figure out a way to do something with it. How do I turn this into points? Pick up one of those storehouses, chuck it in, save this food for winter, and happy days.
It's not my preferred take on tile placement. I like tile placement quite a lot as a mechanism, probably the most out of all 3 of us. And I enjoy like adjacency rules and all that kind of stuff. Games like World Wonders, Carcassonne, like I love those kind of games. For whatever reason, my geometric brain, if that's even a thing, enjoys this kind of puzzle a lot. So this is not my favorite take on this, but what I do like is that it's different. So the classic adjacency kind of rules of tile placement has been done a million times. And while I do love it, it has been done the same way over and over again and with slight wrinkles here and there. Whereas this is doing something very different. Like the fact that there are these 4 different, actually 5 colored tiles. We forgot about the treasure tiles. But also there's silver you can put on your board to even like break up some green tiles. You've got the coal, which is the same way. Coal can be placed to cover little tiles here and there, little spaces. And how you're trying to cover these bonuses for the income you get each round, as well as that silver income that Zach was talking about. So while it's not my preference, I do like that it's different. And so playing a game, say like World Wonders, is not going to give me that same feeling as this, which is good. It's not trying to do that in a really heavy approach. It's actually doing something different. And it's more subtle. The tile placement isn't really like the shiny thing of this game, but it's a nice little, like slight puzzle to navigate, which is enjoyable. And my only real knock against it is what you were sort of saying, Zach, how, you can place them off turn. Like, why not just wait to the very end of the round? Or why don't you just wait, leave all your tiles off the board, Because I made so many decisions where I regretted it later. Like, I'll place this here because it makes sense. And then 3 turns later, like, oh, if I'd not done that, I could have put this coin here and then moved it up here instead. And so I don't like that in the game where you may as well just wait to the end. And I wouldn't anyway because I don't play that way. But really, you should. Like the game, if you want to play well, you should not place anything on your board until you absolutely have to. And I kind of don't think that's a good thing in the game because really, to play well, there's going to be this like 10 minutes of every player placing their tiles at the end of the round.
That would bring a lot more tension to the order and sequencing of your actions. Maybe in a good way. I don't know. For me, the game is quite like relaxed, I guess. It's kind of my version of a relaxed game, which sounds so ridiculous because it's a big, hefty game with so many different paths. But it's my comfort food style of game, like what other people would play a tile placement game for, or, you know, from what I've heard of that game that was a video game that became Spiel des Jahres, Dorf Romantic or something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's just a comfy game where I don't think the game is trying to be the most tense game where you really and ah too much about your sequencing. So I like that it's doing that thing. But if you want more tension from this experience, then yeah, if you had to place them down straight away, that would be a lot more tense. You would be like, oh, where is this going right now? And am I going to be able to get that next spot where there's a perfect orientation for a piece to go right there? But if I don't get that, then what am I going to do there? That would definitely drive tension up a lot, I think.
And not even like straight away. Like imagine if you just had a small little warehouse, I don't know, like a 6x6 grid where you can hold things. Like just something to kind of add, like you can't keep it all. At some point, you have to move things over. The fact that you can just keep everything to the side of the table, like it doesn't bother me as I'm playing it because I don't play that way, but I don't like that a player could play that way. They really should play that way, really.
That's right. What do you guys think about flipping over the tiles?
So Uwe has done this a lot of times in a lot of his games. He's done way back to like Le Havre and stuff. I can't remember if Agricola or that has these kind of things, but Le Havre does. I can't remember if Fields of Arles, which is very similar to this, has that system, but we've seen it a lot. Mostly from Uwe, where you get tiles and you can flip them and they get better versions, or you get wheat, you flip it, it becomes bread. Like that's a common one in a lot of the games. So it's a tried and true thing that works. It can be a bit fiddly the more resources you have that flip over and stuff. And players like me who like to kind of sit there fiddling with the pieces in front of them, like have to try not to do that. You can't just flip a tile over freely and play with it. You have to remember the state that was in. But it's good. I guess the downside really is just the practical aspect of it with the tactile nature of board games where you're like, oh, I need a 3x1 orange. Where are they in the massive pile of bits? And like the organizer's good, like it's fine, but there's a lot of pieces, right? Like a lot to try and find that one piece you need. And when your brain's been giving up for a while, you're like, where is the 4x5 orange? Or trying to find it's gonna be tough, but that's minor. What I didn't like, I don't want to be negative Nancy. I do enjoy the game a lot. What I didn't like so much, which was maybe a me thing more than anything, I keep forgetting the ranking of these tiles. Like, so what's the order again? Is it orange, blue, red, or green? Or what's the lowest? What's the best? And I keep forgetting. Fortunately, there are some components in the game where it actually shows you the hierarchy. Like the little huts you get where you can place resources and stuff. Any board that you can place all 4 colors, it shows you. And it tells you the rules. But on your starting board, it only shows you the green and the blue in order. And I just keep forgetting for some reason. Like I keep forgetting, like, what's the better version? Should I be going from red to orange or orange to red? Because they weren't inherently better or worse in any way, those tiles, right? They're just different versions of themselves and they have kind of different reasons to exist in a way. Like going from an orange to a red allows you to go up to a green. That's one good thing about it. It's like one more step to get to a green tile.
Yeah.
And then the whole thing about the food, how you have to have a balance of, you can't have red next to red, orange next to orange. So there is like a little puzzle there. But for whatever reason, my brain's like, you're not going to remember the order of these tiles. That's going to be something you have to keep figuring out the whole game.
I can't end this podcast, though, without saying that you cannot shave ham off a live pig and have it still be alive. Like, that... Look, there were some actions that were thematic, but that just broke it for me. I was just like, bro...
What about their legs? They don't need those.
It's just not a thing, man. It's just not a thing.
But it should be. It should be a thing.
Meat's back on the menu, boys.
Yeah,
no, it's not.
I was even like, am I crazy? Like, I even Googled it just to make sure that I was not crazy. And I'm like, yeah, it's not a thing. It's not a thing, guys. It's not possible. Like the trauma that would give to an animal, it would just, it doesn't work, man. It doesn't work. They take like tumors out of animals with anesthetic today, but you couldn't have done that back in the day. So Vikings did not do that. That's not a thing, and that definitely was one action where I was like, bro, this is not at all thematic. I can't believe he put it in here. It was just useful for the mechanics of the game, obviously, but I was like, oh, come on.
So I've got one more thing for us, if you like. One more sort of question or discussion. And that is just a broad one. What makes you come back to a game? And let's just start out by saying you can't say fun. It's not because it's fun. But for me, there's things like mastery that we talked about a bit where you want to come back and get better. There's the exploration factor of like a sandbox game like this is. And then like the other one for me is like moments. Like I've got memories of playing games from years ago that I loved playing. And it's like there was a certain moment in the game which I still remember today. And it's like cherished. And I'd like to go back and play the game again because of that moment. So I don't know if there's anything else you guys can think of, but for me, it's like there's the whole mastery, there's the exploration, discovery kind of feeling, and then there's the moments, the things that you remember for years to come. Then again, that's saying nothing about fun, nothing about just enjoyment because I like playing the puzzle, whatever it is. But for me, A Feast for Odin kind of drops the ball on the memorable moment side of things. Like there's nothing about the game that goes, oh, I remember that time that I got 2 wood and built that thing. Like it's not exciting. The game shines purely for the exploration mastery, where it's like you can come back and you can get better and you can try new things. Like it's got that in spades, but it doesn't have those kind of moments for me. So is there a game or an example or other things where it hits on all three of those things? Because, there's other discussions I've had in the past about board games, how they can kind of meet different needs of people, like the tactile factor, the art factor, the rules factor. And if there are these three things of kind of moments, discovery, and mastery, like are these three things, can they exist in a game? And is it something we should strive for designers to put these three things into games in some way if we can? Lots of questions in one big question, but there you go.
Yeah, I agree that like the reason I'd come back to A Feast for Odin would be I want to try a different set of actions. Like, for example, I basically never use the trade actions. Like, I like to try and have a good game of it, mainly trading and turning objects into other objects or whatever, and slightly better objects or whatever. Yeah, I think your moments thing might kind of be what I sometimes would refer to as like the feeling a game gives you, or that kind of like if I think back to playing Risk as a kid and like just how much fun we had playing that with my brother, my older brother and sister, even though they would obviously smash me because they were like 5 years older and I was little, but just that how kind of epic it felt playing it. Man, I think sometimes putting all three in games is challenging because I think a lot of those games that provide certain moments often are like more interactive, more telling a story, and sometimes like they don't so much have that like strategic mastery that me, you, and Sam really love. So, I mean, you mentioned in a previous podcast how Nemesis made you feel and like how it had these amazing moments. And it's like, maybe there is some level of mastery to that game, but it's probably not quite the same as what brings us back to play a game like this or some of the other games that we've talked about in the podcast. So I think you probably can put them all together in the same game, but maybe it's just a lot easier to have one or two rather than all three.
I think player interaction definitely leads towards moments. Like Architects has good player interaction, and therefore there are these amazing moments when someone does something and then you remember it for years to come. Like Sam talked last time, I think, about Luke's strategy of like basically when someone would take his work and he'd capture them back straight away and kind of create this new meta of like, don't mess with my workers. And you remember that stuff. It's like kind of like, whoa, that was weird and memorable. And it's kind of exciting in its own way. And Architects does have, a lot of sandbox feel where you explore, you can master the game. But I'd say you can master the game. There's a lot of chaos in the game where you can get thrown off, but there's a lot to explore in the game. So I wonder if it's more these Euro games where there's low interaction and low tension that leads to less memorable moments. But yeah, I don't know. It's a interesting question for myself, at least I think, as I'm thinking about my own games. Like, am I trying to address these things in my games? Yeah.
I think extreme strategies can create memorable games, whether they're individual moments. But like games that allow you to potentially win the game with a really out of the box way of playing the game, I think, at least for me, those can be kind of like the low interaction Euro equivalent of memorable moments, where it's not like a specific moment, but it's like, oh my goodness, this thing was actually viable. Like I did this really weird stuff that shouldn't work, but it worked. And it's like, that's a memorable game.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think another one that kind of leads to, perhaps it leads to moments, but it's kind of metagaming. It's like developing a way that the table plays the game and getting either in sync with it or subverting it. So in some cooperative games like The Crew, or even a game where it's a partnership game like Bridge, there's something really exciting about building synergy between you and the other players. There's these moments in The Crew when you start really understanding what the other player is doing and meaning by those cards. The Mind is another one that gets that really, really quickly. You get into the flow and you're like, this is a really great feeling that we've got the synergy, we're in sync and stuff like that. In a competitive game, it might be like understanding the way that the table plays and then sort of subverting that expectation and then finding a counterplay to the way that the table is already playing. So I think that's another thing. I'm not sure. Maybe it's moments, but there's some hints of mastery there as well. But it's not just mastery of the game that's on the table. It's mastery of the game that is being played between us. It's above the level of the table. It's like face to face, it's understanding the other players. And there's something kind of happening at a more social level there, which is really, I don't know, it's really compelling, exciting if you ever have that experience with games. Hanabi can be like that too, as well. Kind of getting in the flow with each other.
Learning how to cheat without cheating in Hanabi, yeah. That's the way to do it.
This one is blue.
That's more of a look into Sam's brain and how he sees games and plays games. But yeah, kind of does fall into moments. Because like in The Mind, I can remember playing with you and Luke. I can remember playing them and those feelings that we had while playing those games. They stick with you, right? Like you remember them, you kind of treasure them. Like if someone says the game, The Mind, I'm like, that's right. I remember the game. But it's like an emotional attachment to the game because of past experiences.
Yeah. And in a way, it sounds ridiculous to some people, but it's kind of, in that sense, it becomes more like a sport where you really are a team that is just on the same page completely. And you're all fulfilling your role in the way that you're supposed to. And a lot of it is where you're communicating without words and communicating your intentions purely through the medium of the game and how you like to play it. And those moments are just magic. It's really, really cool when a game can do that.
Well, I've certainly made myself more aware of this. So I think thinking on some of our games right now that we're working on, like I'm going to try and think through, like, are these things in our games? Do they need to be in the game? Because if they're lacking, are they lacking for good reason? So this is like just stuff I'm just thinking through.
That's the question that comes to my mind. Is it like, is there a time when having one of these things is actually not good for the game? It's kind of working against the game's identity and what it's trying to really excel at. Like one of the downsides for mastery is that if there is a really high ceiling, lots that you can improve at with the game. If it's a game that you play with friends, then someone who has gained a lot of mastery is often going to win every time, if there is really a high ceiling for that game. So how do you make it a game that new players will want to play and enjoy? And so that means that maybe some party games and some lighter games, Zach was talking about gateway games as well, maybe you want to limit. Maybe it's not limiting how high the ceiling is, but maybe it's raising the floor up so that new players are always playing at a certain level. There's not a massive skill gap, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we've got to always remember that not every game is for everybody as well. That's
Right.
the other thing to kind of consider, right? But if we can try and put these things into our games without ruining the game, I think it's kind of important. Another game as an example would be Cryptid, which I know, Sam, you love and your mates love, and I am terrible at that game because my brain can't contain that information. But that one is definitely very high on the mastery level. You can get very good at that game if you're wired that way, if you play it a lot. It's got great moments, like that moment that someone does say, I've solved it, or when they've actually got it wrong or whatever it might be, but it lacks almost entirely on the whole discovery factor, right? Even though it's a game about discovery, there's no way to like play it differently. You're kind of playing the system, but it shines so heavily on the other two that it makes up for the lack on the other one. So a lot of games probably are doing this, right?
So with you mentioning Cryptid, I would like to do story time because today we talked a little bit about AP, analysis paralysis, and I showed a friend of mine Cryptid who he's not really a board gamer. He likes chess and that sort of thing, but he doesn't play all of these modern hobby games. But he is a very, very intelligent human being. I think he has a doctorate in maths, or not a doctorate, a master's in maths. Very, very intelligent, but also quite slow, like very considered in how he thinks about things. And when he talks and stuff, he won't rush to any conclusions or anything like that. So I introduced Cryptid to him because he's a logical guy and I thought he would enjoy it. And me being me, I got to this point in the game where I had solved it and I was just a bit of a big mouth. I'm like, I've got it. I've solved it. But it wasn't my turn. And it was his turn. So he proceeds to sit there for 15 minutes, actually 15 minutes, quite happy to solve this puzzle because it was solvable at that point. And of course he got it, but we were all just sitting there like, come on, man, take your turn. Like, what are you doing? But the fact that I said it could be solved meant that he had the joy of solving this puzzle that he knew was solvable at that point. If he didn't know it was solvable at that point, he might have just taken a turn, but like he just went for it. He just took his time. No shame. And I now have learned a thing or two about opening my mouth. So there,
Nice.
story time over. We hope you've enjoyed our discussion about A Feast for Odin. But we'd love to hear from you. Jump on the Garphill Games Discord and let us know on the podcast channel if you've played it and what you thought. Have there been games that have made you disengage during your turn? And do you look for games that include mastery, exploration, and moments? If you've been following our recent podcasts, you'll know that we are currently drafting games from BGG's top 200. This podcast, we have arrived to 41 to 50. Each of us will be drafting. The first player to draft will be Sam. The second draft will be me, and the third will be Shem. But that does mean that Shem gets to ban a game before any of us draft. So let's just take it away. Actually, before we do that, while recording the podcast, I forgot to read out the games. So here they are in order. Everdell, The Crew Mission Deep Sea, Viticulture Essential Edition, Hegemony, Lead Your Class to Victory, Heat, Pedal to the Metal, Marvel Champions, the card game, Crockenhole, Kanban EV, Food Chain Magnet, and Underwater Cities.
So last time I was very merciful. I allowed Sam to have his cake, basically, the game he wanted. I didn't ban it or didn't take it from him. I can't do it again, Sam. I can't do it again. Like we all want Underwater Cities. Well, me and Sam do at least, I think for sure. And if I can't have it, no one can have it. So I'm banning Underwater Cities.
Well, Shem, you were 100% correct that I was going to go underwater. And I was going to go deep underwater. But I was actually going to pick The Crew Mission Deep Sea. So I'm very pleased that you have banned Underwater City from yourself.
Nah, you would have taken it.
No one will ever know what I was actually going to pick. I'm very happy with The Crew Mission Deep Sea. I've already talked about it on this episode. I love trick-taking. I love cooperative games. And this is a very, very clever combination of the two. I think it's even better than the original Quest for Planet 9. This is a fantastic game, really worth trying out. I think it thrives at 4 players, and my game group, we like to play it after having played a big event game for the night, and we'll play about an hour or two of The Crew. Mission Deep Sea is a keeper. All right, so I am going to pick Hegemony. Hegemony is an epic, asymmetric political game, and I've only played it once, but we were just talking about moments, right? And that was a game for me where there were just some brilliant moments in how the different class factions interacted. And there was just this hilarious moment at the end of the game. I was playing as the capitalists and my friend Ruben was playing as the working class. And as the capitalist, you provide jobs for the working class. But at a certain point in the game, I started taking away jobs because he was scoring more points than me. He was getting ahead in the game. So I started taking away jobs. I took away so many jobs that he was able to play a card that was called a labor strike, and he was able to shut down, all my businesses until I added more jobs for his workers. In my turn, what did I do? I played the card buy a private island. So I spent all my money instead of investing in new businesses for his jobs. I just bought a private island, which gave me in-game points. I just thought it was such a funny interaction and was kind of realistic to what the world can be like sometimes. It has just some great thematic interaction, and it's just really clever. Unfortunately, I haven't managed to play it more times, and stupidly, I left it in Italy. I could have brought it to Modena when you guys were in Modena and had Sam take it back, and then we could have played it more. But I thought it was brilliant, and I'd love to play it more times. Speaking of a game with moments, right? Yeah, that's great.
That is the only game I have not played from this group of 10, so no opinions on that one. I'm looking forward to playing it sometime. This is not the best 10 for me. I think this might be one of the worst 10s, actually. But my 10 out of 10 was taken away by someone. That was by me. So I have an 8, thanks to roll 7s and 6s. And so the 8 for me is Everdell. By no means my most favorite game of all time, but I do really enjoy it. I think what it does well. there's a lot of expansions and they aren't all necessary. There's little bits I like in some of them. But the core game, the core concept, the idea of pairing your buildings with your workers and putting little door thingies on to like get those bonuses, save resources, just the flow of the game, the simplicity of it is where it shines. It does what it does well, I think is what is the key thing of Everdell. And of course it looks amazing. Bosley's artwork. So Everdell will be my pick. Probably not my top of all my games picked so far, but it's definitely a very solid game and one that'll probably remain in my collection for a while.
But is it the game that you've got that takes up the most space? Do you have any games in your collection that take up more space than Everdell?
Probably. GKR heavy hitters, I guess. Quite a big box.
Do you have the Arnek big box coming or not?
Nah, it's not quite available yet, New Zealand. We probably will be getting it, we probably will.
I played Heat Pedal to the Metal with some lovely, lovely people who were on the Garphill Discord server. And it was like I was flipping riding a bicycle and these guys were driving Formula One cars. I kept like failing out on every stretch. And they were like, I think they were being so kind. They're like, oh, yo, we can just push you a bit further ahead. I was so far behind that I wasn't benefiting from Slipstream. So I was just like so cooked. So my thinking on that game is probably a little unfair. I really, really struggled on that game. I haven't played it again, but I'm really intrigued by Marvel Champions. Have you played that, Shem?
I have played it once with Bobby. I liked it. And the truth is, if I played it more, I might like it more as well. I only played it once. Like it's like it does what it does well. It's simple. I guess I wasn't overly inspired by it, but if I owned it and there's a lot of expansions, I think I would probably actually quite enjoy playing it. And the theme's fun, right? Like superheroes is fun. But no, it's a 7 out of 10 for me. So it was nothing like wrong with the game for me, but I wasn't rushing out to buy it. So like an 8 for me is like I kind of want to own this game. Then 9s and 10s are the ones I love to play anytime.
Thanks for listening to the Lens and Veil podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Garphill Games. You can follow Garphill Games on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, X, and YouTube by subscribing to our newsletter at garphill.com or by joining the Garphill Discord server.
Does Sam have the honours today?
Yeah, it's his game.
When did you last do one, Zach?
I'll do Slay the Spire, guys. I'll do Slay the Spire.
All right. There we go.